we're going into some nerdy shit. It's what I like to call the Doc Brown model. Same used in Back to the Future as what we're going to be using here, but for Terminator. So what we have is the main timeline. Now the consensus, from what I've read is, and from the films, is that the original timeline, there were no Terminators sent back. They went through to 2029. Carl Reese is in the concentration camp with John Connor. He rallies the men, and they fight back. And then on the turn of them fighting back, the Terminators get desperate and decide to do time displacement shit. And that's how it becomes a semi-quasi loop. Now that's how I'm going to start. Some people may disagree, but this is the to me it seems the most logical reason. A normal timeline where no Terminator, no Carl Reese is sent back, and it just happens. John Connor is just a geezer that rises the rest of the humans up in that concentration camp and then starts the resistance. That's where we're going to start, with a normal timeline. In this timeline, Carl Reese is not John Connor's dad. There's also no prior knowledge to Terminators going back in time in this timeline. It is I'm going to call it the simplistic timeline, the bare basic one. It is mentioned in Terminator 1 briefly, I wouldn't say very briefly, but briefly, the future of this timeline is mentioned. When they're in the car, he shows her the scan on his arm. That is this timeline mentioned. In that whole little sort of like segment after Tech Noir is when it's mentioned. And the only time it's ever mentioned. So what we have here to represent the time displacement is a red line. And it goes from 2029 to 1984. Now this is going to denote both the Terminator and Carl Reese going back to 84. Now, of course, the curvature of the line is, the top of the curvature is going to be the point horizon, or the event horizon, and then the back down is, well, according to how time displacement works. Anyway, this line represents the first time jump, the first displacement of the Terminator and Carl Reese to 84, which is featured in the first film. Upward curvatures are always time displacements to the past. Downward curvatures will be time displacements to the future, for future reference. So, the consequences of this time displacement are shown here. You have the time displacement curvature, and then at the point of when they've gone back, it shoots down and makes a new timeline. Now this is the Terminator 2 timeline. Everything up until the point where the Terminators and Carl Reese jumped back will be known by the same people in this new timeline. Anything forward of that will either be different, or there'll be some minor differences according to what happened in that first time displacement thing. Now we know from the first time displacement, Carl Reese got some sexy time with Sarah, and he became the father of John Connor. We also know that the Terminator left the hand and the chip back, which in this timeline, the consequence of that is the Terminator going back is in essence the start of the whole Skynet process, completely different from the original timeline. This is where people seem to get a little bit confused. The Terminators from Terminator 2 come from the Terminator 2 2029. They do not come from the original timeline's 2029, because they changed it as soon as they jumped. This is how we get around the waiting in line effect, which I'll do a video for that, explaining why this video is explaining everything. So here is the Arnie and the T1000's time displacement curvature. It comes from there, the new Terminator 2 timeline, and goes back to 95. The events of Terminator 2 are at that, with that dot thing there. Now we know, according to the film, they destroy all the evidence, they kill all the Terminators, and they stop the Judgment Day thing from happening. I'm happy with that. What should come out now is where the time displacement thing is, another little thing going down into a new timeline that goes across without any Terminators, and a different 2029, a peaceful one, a non-nuclear war thing or whatever. But I need people to remember, when he's fighting Robert Patrick in the molten steel mill, when he jams his arm into that massive cog and then has to break his arm off to go and fight, that arm is never thrown, it's not destroyed, it's left there, and that is given artistic license for number 3 to be made, which, you know, I have no time for. But that is the continuation of the timeline. That is why we get a Terminator 3. Now, Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles, is in this gap here underneath Terminator 2. I'll make a different video for that. It's a little bit more complicated, and it's going to make this simple model diagram more complicated than what it needs to be. So I'll leave that out and I'll make a different video for that. That's why it's not included at the moment on this diagram. Okay, Terminator 3. Same as before, down and to the right, making its new timeline thing. And of course, the Terminators are going to be coming from this timeline to 2004. So you have the knowledge from the first time displacement down to the Terminators from Terminator 2 up until number 3. So from 84 to 2004, we know that the Terminators have come back twice, and they've sent the Resistance to send fighters back. But what they don't know is what happens after, because that continuation timeline happens because of thingy, because they time jump. As soon as they time jump, it makes a new line, and that's the new relevant one that happens. We go again. Terminator 3's time displacement curve goes back, creates a new line. Now, without Sarah Connor Chronicles in here, I'm gonna say that this is salvation. The grey line is salvation. With Sarah Connor Chronicles included, this grey line wouldn't be here. It would be above the 84 line, the original timeline. Because they jump forward, they jump back, and fucking Sarah Connor. It's a little bit more confusing, but it's a lot more easier to condense it down like this. So we have the original timeline, Terminator 2, and the Terminator's going back, happening, moving it down. So this grey one is now the most relevant line that is up to date. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, it is if you take away everything else apart from the 84 and then the slant down to the grey line and then continue on, that is the mess that all the time displacement has caused. It's changed the history, or not history, the future into this parallel line thing, and that's it. The other lines, the other years and the other continuations are discarded now because they're irrelevant. What's irrelevant is that grey line, which is supposedly salvation, and whatever happens in that line is the most important now. There's no point in going back again because you can't. So what I've added here is I've added the Judgment Day line. It's obviously not to scale with dates and so forth, but that's when it happens. And if you look, you've got 84, and then you've got the middle line for it to be Judgment Day. Same with Terminator 2. These are like in the past things of where it happens, and then because they keep changing, they keep moving the date of Judgment Day down until you get to 3, when it happens within a couple of hours while the film's going on, and then Salvation is after Judgment Day and it continues after. So and that's just an easier representation for these 3 films and all the times displacement that happens in them. Now if you don't agree with it and you have a better model, then I'm quite happy to hear it. The whole point of this is to show that the waiting line model is stupid, and that the Terminators have to come from the alternative future to go back into that timeline thing. Every time they time displace, Terminators come from that different future. That's the whole point of the model.